Okay. All right. So thank you all for joining us today. We not only have for the Jacob and Sarah Ebey house, but it looks like we also have some from Marysville way. So I want to welcome Peter and thank him so much for putting this presentation together. We love to get speakers from the island, but it's even sometimes more special when we can reach off island and grab some information from there as well. So I had a great chat with Peter a little bit beforehand, and it sounds like he's been invested in the Marysville Historical Society and Museum for a while. So really interested in hearing what you have for us today.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And thank you guys for having me today. I was telling her I haven't presented on history probably since college. So it's kind of fun to have a group that wants to listen to what I have to say. I will now share my screen. Can everyone see this? Let's see. There, we're good. So again, my name is Peter Condyles. I'm the Vice President of the Marysville Historical Society. It's kind of funny because you go over to the island and there's a lot of stuff with the word Ebey on it. And then you come over to Marysville and there's a lot of stuff with the word Ebey on it. And it wasn't until I was involved in the Marysville Historical Society that I figured out the connection there. And I want to tell you guys a little bit today about what I've learned over the years and the cool connection that our little town has to Whidbey Island. First, a little bit about the Marysville Historical Society. We were founded in 1974. We're committed to the preservation of the history of the greater Marysville area. Since 1974, the goal of the group was to open a museum. There were a lot of different iterations of the museum, a lot of plans, a lot of things fell through. But finally in 2014, they were able to get enough money to put a shell of a building up, which if you're ever in Marysville, it's right next to Jennings Park, which is the largest park in town. And then in 2016, we were finally able to open the museum. We're now open for public tours Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays from 1 to 4. And then we're also open by appointment. So if anybody ever is over in the area and you would like a tour, give me a call, give me an email. And anybody in our organization would be happy to open it up and show you what we have. Question, what is the greater Marysville area? We not just preserve the history of Marysville, but we go up to Smoky Point, out to Warm Beach, the Lake Goodwin area, and then up towards Getchell, Cisco Heights, Whiskey Ridge, where I live. And then Tulalip does have its own museum, but we also like to tell the story of the Tulalip Reservation because their people are an important part of Marysville's history, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So now let's talk about Ebey Slough. Ebey Slough is the longest and furthest north tributary in the Snohomish River Delta. So Ebey Slough, I highlighted it in red. You can see my shaky hand. Ebey Slough breaks off from the Snohomish River south of Everett near Lowell. It goes up to Caballero. If anybody's taken the Highway 2 trestle up to Lake Stevens near Caballero's Corner there, you've gone over the Ebey Slough. It continues over near Spencer Island and Otter Island, and then it follows up near Sunnyside, and then up into Marysville, and then dumps off into the Puget Sound over by Priest Point on the Tulalip Reservation. Ebey Slough was a very important part of Marysville's formation. James Comfort was the founder of Marysville. He came to Marysville in 1878. He had come to the area in 1875 as the agent of the United States Indian Agency as the representative of the government on the Tulalip tribe. He had formed a really good relationship with a lot of the members of the Tulalip tribe. He ran a store out there, and there were concerns from the federal government that Comfort had become too close to the native people to be able to effectively do his job. And in 1878, the U.S. government fired him from being the Indian agent on the Tulalip Reservation. Wanting to stay close to his friends that he had made on the reservation, he purchased land on the area that is now Marysville. The area, I should have put a map on here, but the area where Marysville started was actually down by the slough along First Street. It's called First Street now, but it was called Front Street back then. And the slough was a really important part of why Comfort chose this area. It was close to the reservation, and being on the slough, you could bring in the logs that were cut down up on the hills, and then they came down the Snohomish River, down the slough, and then to the mills that would later off the Ebey Slough. And at its height, there were 16 different mills on Ebey Slough in Marysville. And the mills were pretty much the 19 teens, 1920s, and then it died off. In 1949, the Welco mill was established, which was a conglomerate of a few different mills in the area. And that mill actually lasted until 2006 when there was the housing crisis and they didn't need as much wood anymore. So the mills actually lasted a pretty long time on Ebey Slough. But Ebey Slough did not just have a history in mills in Marysville. When the mills started to go by the wayside, it became a place for recreation. The Rhinell Boat Works, which was a pretty important boating company in the Puget Sound, had its headquarters on Ebey Slough, and Geddes Marina was also on Ebey Slough. These were two big boating outfits in the area, and boating was so big on Ebey Slough and in Marysville that for many years they had what was called the Strawberry Cup, which was one of the largest boat races in the Pacific Northwest. And the boat, I should have put a map of the boat race, I didn't think about it. It would run along Ebey Slough down through the Snohomish River and then back up to the Sound and then back into Marysville. So that was a really large event. Recently, as kind of the actual boating industry has moved out of Marysville, it's become more of a recreation spot, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The city has invested a lot of money in putting a trail along the slough. There's now a boat launch and a park, and the city has plans to expand that in the future. And this picture I've got here is actually taken from the banks of Ebey Slough, looking back at First Street in Marysville in the 1890s when the city was incorporated in 1891. So you can see just how close the city was to the slough when it was first established. Oh, and I've got a few pictures here. This is on the city wharf at the end of Beach Street. So you can see the logs here and the slough. And then here's a better view. This one was taken from about where the I-5 overpass goes over Ebey Slough. You can see this is the train trestle that goes into Marysville. That bridge is still there. And then you can kind of see, you can't see when my zoom box is covering it, but this is Mount Pilchuck right here. This picture got cut off, but you can see here's the I-5 overpass that's currently goes over Ebey Slough. And then this was the Rhinell boat lift that they would lift the boats in and out of the water. And this one is at the christening of the new boat dock, which this was before the I-5 overpass went over the slough. So this was about where that was. And it cut off, but this is the Mayor Dudley of Marysville in the 50s, and he was breaking a bottle of champagne over the boat launch here. And then this is what it looks like today. So you can see I-5 is right here. Here's the train trestle that we showed that was in that picture a few slides ago. And then this is the new boat launch that was put in. There used to be houseboats on the slough, but probably I'd say 5 or 6 years ago, there was a really bad storm and it blew all the houseboats away, and a few of them floated into the train trestle and it destroyed them. And since then, the city hasn't allowed houseboats on the slough. So the question is, and this was when we were chatting about putting this presentation together, what impact did Isaac Ebey have in Marysville while he was alive? And the answer is none, really. When Ebey came up through the Ebey Slough, Marysville hadn't even been established. When he did his famous journey up Ebey Slough, which earned him the namesake of the slough, that was in about 20 years before James Comfort had even located to the Tulalip Reservation. But what's really interesting is even though Ebey didn't come to Marysville when it was established, there's still a lasting impact of him. And there's a lot of remnants in Marysville that bear his name. So I want to go through and just talk about a few of those. The first one is the obvious, it's Ebey Waterfront Park. Ebey Waterfront Park is one of the most popular parks in Marysville. It has boat launches, it has a park. The city's working right now to expand the park, to put in an amphitheater. And it also is the trailhead for the Quileute Estuary Trail, which takes you from the waterfront on Ebey Slough, along the slough up into a few neighborhoods there. And the city's put a lot of investment into doing that. And it's a really popular part of town. The other one is the IOOF, the International Order of Odd Fellows. They built the Marysville Opera House in 1911. At the time, it was not called the Opera House. It's been many different things over the years. In recent years, the city's actually purchased it, and now you can rent it out for events. But the group that put it together, the IOF, they were the Ebey Lodge. So for many years, that was the name of the chapter in town, and that was the name of the opera house. And then this last one I want to talk about is the Ebey Slough Bridge. The Ebey Slough Bridge was opened in 1927, and the bottom picture is what it looked like. It was torn down in 2012, and you can see a picture of it up on top. You can see the bridge here, and then the new bridge that was put right next to it before they demolished the old one. But what was interesting about the Ebey Slough Bridge is it was the final connection of the Pacific Highway from Oregon to Canada. So before this, you could take the Pacific Highway or 99 to Everett, and then you'd have to take Highway 1 around the Snohomish River Delta because they didn't have a way to get over the Delta. It was too much money, and it was just a bunch of marshland. So you'd have to take Highway 1 from Everett up to Cavalier Corner near Lake Stevens and then into Marysville. But in 1925, they decided to invest in getting across the Delta, and they built a series of 4 bridges, 2 of which are still there. It would have been 3 if they didn't tear down the Ebey Slough Bridge. And they had a huge ceremony in 1927 to commemorate the final, because it went from Everett to Marysville, and the last piece of that was over the Ebey Slough. So it was a pretty big deal. They had a parade and fireworks, and the governor cut the ribbon and everything to celebrate the final connection between Oregon and Canada. So I just told you that Ebey didn't have much of an impact in Marysville when he was alive. So how did we get this channel named after him is the question. So let's start and talk a little bit about Isaac Ebey. And I know some of you probably know this information, so we can go over it pretty quickly. Ebey came to the Olympia area in the late 1840s. He wore many hats while he was there. He represented Thurston County in the Oregon Territorial Legislature. He was responsible for the naming of the city of Olympia, suggesting that they name it after the Olympic Mountains that were very close to Olympia. He also was responsible for the suggestion to name King County after a former vice president. They officially changed that to Martin Luther King in the last half century or so. In 1850, he moved to Whidbey Island, and in 1854, he moved his family there, and they began to farm. During this time, he served as the Island County prosecuting attorney, and while he was on the island, President Franklin Pierce appointed him as Inspector of Revenues for the Puget Sound District, which at the time was headquartered out of Olympia. When he got appointed to that position, he moved it to Port Townsend, a little bit closer to Whidbey Island, so his commute wouldn't be as bad. And he made Port Townsend the official port of entry for Puget Sound. In 1855, he was elected to a 3-year term as the colonel of the volunteer militia for Jefferson and Island County. That was the same year that the mainland Indian War broke out. And this was a war between essentially the white settlers and many of the tribes in eastern and western Washington, with the exception of the Snoqualmie tribe. The Snoqualmie tribe, just for different tribal political issues, sided with the settlers. And I'll get to the next slide here. And this is where we get to Ebey's journey. In November of 1855, Ebey led a troop from Port Townsend up what would become later known as Ebey Slough. And this was actually the first steam-powered boat trip to travel up that waterway, and that was by the steamship, the Traveler. And this, you did another red line for what his journey with his militia would have looked like, coming down here near the bottom of Whidbey Island and then back up to Ebey Slough. And this map kind of gives a better image of Ebey Slough, and the X is where he eventually landed. Now, where the Ebey Slough and the Snohomish River come together, there was an island. This is an older map that shows that island, and this is what the Google map shows today. So you can see there's an island there, but if you look at the aerials, there's really nothing there anymore, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You can kind of see a speck of a sandbar, but the island that he was traveling to is no longer there. So they went up the Ebey Slough. They went up to where Ebey Slough meets with the Snohomish River, where there was at one point an island. They chose this to build their fort because it was in a really good location to counter any natives that were coming down the Snohomish River, as the Snohomish River was one of the bigger routes for them to come down from eastern Washington and from the hills. So they were stationed there, and they built the fort there. The fort looked something like this. It was a one-story building. I originally had a picture of a two-story one on here, but as I was doing more research, it was a one-story building, one-story blockhouse. And the troops, they appreciated Ebey and his leadership so much that they named their fort after him, Fort Ebey. And in a lot of reading that I'd done, it's mentioned that this is the first Fort Ebey, because as you all know, there's the second one out on Whidbey Island later in World War II, but this one is specified as the first Fort Ebey. And it was at this time that they decided to not only name the fort Ebey, but they named the slough after him as well. And on many early maps, it's called Ebey's Slough, more possessive. Now it's just Ebey Slough. And I don't know if it was one of those deals that it was, you know, kind of folklore for a while, and then they eventually officially named it, or how any of that worked. But it's been since then, and really I can't find any other name that they've ever had for that waterway. A little bit about Fort Ebey. Fort Ebey actually never saw battle, and no tribes, no band of Indians ever came down the Snohomish River. So it was established in November of 1855, and in early 1856, in the winter, it was disbanded. It sat vacant for many years, and then in 1857, it was destroyed. As mentioned, currently there's no remnants of the fort, even the island out there kind of near where it splits off south of Lowell. And then, as you all know, the rest of the story, on August 11th, 1857, Isaac Ebey was shot and beheaded out on Whidbey Island. So the question is, and this is kind of in bringing it more to today's times, will Ebey's legacy last in Marysville? And that's been a big question, not as much in the recent years, but in 2012, the city of Marysville petitioned the Washington state government to rename Ebey Slough, Ebey Estuary. Along the delta there, a lot of farming had taken place over the years, and they diked a lot of the marshland. Working with the Tulalip tribes, the city broke the dikes and created the Quileute Estuary, which is a salt flats out from Everett to Marysville. And the city thought that now they should rename the slough Ebey Estuary. Well, that got a lot of people talking, and the Tulalip tribe suggested that Ebey's name be removed altogether. It was talked about for many years back then, but ultimately both proposals were never pursued by the city or the tribe. For now, the Ebey name in Marysville remains. Does anybody have any questions?
Let's see. I don't know if you're able to, let's see if we can see everyone here. See if there are questions. Let's see. I might stop your sharing. Is that okay, Peter?
That's fine. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, great. Wonderful, though. Does anyone have any questions for Peter right off the bat?
Was there ever any kind of a battle with the Indians, with Ebey and his troops? I mean, did they?
Nope, they were disbanded and sent home in the winter of 1856. Because that war, it went from 1855 to the end of 1856, but it wasn't what we think of as a war. It was kind of more just a series of battles. So they ended up going to Fort Ebey. They didn't like the winter, and they were sent back to Fort Townsend.
Now, the fact that he got shot in the head, was that a similar tribe, or like was there some bad blood, or was that a whole nother incident from?
That was a whole nother incident. So what had happened was, you know, he went home to Ebey, the preserve, so Whidbey Island, and there was another man by the name of Kellogg that had done some things. I don't remember exactly what he had done, but there was a tribe of Indians from the north that had come looking for him. He was not on Whidbey Island at the time. He was elsewhere, and the tribe essentially said, well, Ebey seems like the leader of this area, so we're going to kill him. So they shot and beheaded him.
Wow.
And Rick, you'll when you get out to the house, you'll be telling that story many times.
Yeah, I gave the very brief
Yeah.
10,000.
No, that's fine.
overview of it.
I've heard this story because I've gone in and talked to the volunteers, and
Yeah.
I don't, yeah, I heard it a while back, so I don't remember
Yeah.
how it went. So I'm looking forward to hearing it again. So
Absolutely.
And History Link, and a lot of what I was able, a lot of the information, History Link is a great resource for everybody. It's a Washington State History Encyclopedia online, and they have a really good article about the beheading of Isaac Ebey that I read before this. So.
Another question.
Yeah.
Was his title colonel, was that due to being elected as the head of this militia, or was that title from some other service?
No, he was elected that. So when the legislature in 1855 created what was, I guess, essentially militia districts, and each district was to raise their own militia and elect a colonel. They had Island and Jefferson County was a militia district, and they elected Ebey to a 3-year term. And that's how so it's kind of weird. It's a military title, but in this case, it's an elected position.
Okay, thank you.
Which Ebey served under Abraham Lincoln in the Indian Wars in Illinois? Was that Isaac Ebey too? Also?
That was his father, Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to say in response to your little story, Peter, about his killing, that was in retaliation. Dr. Kellogg had done nothing wrong, but they were looking for him because the year before, our military had fired on many of their tribe that had come down and were camping on the shores and killed about 27 of their tribe. Mm-hmm. So that was a revenge killing. Mm-hmm. Next year.
Makes sense.
They were camped at Port Gamble, I think, right?
Okay, that's right. I remember. Yes, I remember.
Yeah. But they did come after Kellogg, so that he is a piece of that story for sure. Just because he was important, also. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. Any other questions for Peter? Do you think that are they going to revisit the renaming of the slough? Do you think, Peter?
It's it's funny because I had completely forgotten all about that until I started doing research and the article popped back up, and it was a really kind of a hot button issue here for a number of months back in 2012, 2013, and then it kind of, as those issues go, it kind of just disappeared. So I would be inclined to say no. I don't think it will, but you never know. We shall see. With the city's putting a lot of investment into the slough down there. Like I said, they're expanding the park, putting in like an amphitheater and different things. So we might hear it come back up, but personally, I don't think it will.
Wanting to change the name to estuary, that kind of implies there might be some other facilities going in that might educate the public about the estuary and the science behind it. Is that where?
Yeah, they've done so. They've put in a trail system around the slough and then the estuary, and it's got really good interpretive signage and different things on wildlife, and the plants and everything, and kind of the more natural history of the area. So, and I expect that they're going to continue to do some of that stuff.
Cool. Hey, Peter, your background, are you a historian? Is that?
Yeah, I have. So I've been a member of the Historical Society since 2013. I got a degree in history from Western, and I work in government relations right now, but history is my passion. So, and I write, if you're interested, I write a history blog it focuses a lot mainly on Snohomish County and Marysville, but I've done a few articles on kind of larger Pacific Northwest regional topics. So,
cool. What's your blog called?
It's just my name on, if I don't know if you've heard of medium.com. It's like a website where you can write articles for free and then post them. So if you go on medium.com and just type my name in, it'll bring up my page.
Great. I will find that and link it when we release this training video. Great. Well, Peter, thank you so much for meeting with us today. I think that was a nice, concise, but very effective look into Ebey's involvement over your way. And so I think it's just, again, we know a lot about him, but just seeing another aspect and how influential he was in such a large area, he really, in a sense, conquered a lot in such a short amount of time. So we appreciate you just sort of enlightening us about his impact on Marysville. Well, what impact he had, more so his name, right? But we appreciate that clarification. And if I get any questions from volunteers, I'll send them over your way. But I am thankful that you met with us and can't wait to use this recording as well in future trainings.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
You know,
All right.
what's funny to me is how long it took to go from Olympia to Whidbey Island back then. I mean, he was very influential around all of the state, but to like moving to one of his offices to Port Townsend, just to kind of get closer to Olympia. That, I mean, when you think about how long it would take to get from Port Townsend to Olympia, I mean, it's kind of remarkable. Anyway.
Yeah, it's a good thought.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, everyone. I will see you in a couple weeks.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.